Right, I want to take you back 10 years now. It's been exactly a decade since the start of the World Cup here in South Africa. It was a magical time. But here's the question. Did we make the most of it? Let's explore that issue. Reporter Michael Marillier joining me now. Good evening, Michael. Always lovely to see you. It certainly put us on the map. We were flavour of the month for, for that period. What exactly did it do for our brand in a lasting way?
Yeah, absolutely, Sally. So we've actually looked at some of the data. We've looked at the Nation's Brand Index, which is published by a company called Brand Finance, and explored how our brand has changed in terms of value over the last decade. And very much it is a case of missed chances. Let's take a look at the stats, Sally, and we'll explore how the value of our national brand has actually changed. And you'll see that represented by the number on the shirt. So in 2010, we were ranked 34th in the world in terms of our brand value. Remember, we're talking about the country, not Bafana Bafana. Then we improved in making it to number 31 in the world by 2012. So it seems the World Cup gave us some momentum. But ever since then, Sally, we've actually been shifting backwards. So in 2013, we slipped back to rank number 32 in the world. 2014, 3 places back to 35. At that stage, our value as a brand was $256 billion. The following year, we lost $30 billion worth of brand value. And we've been heading back towards our own goal, if you'll excuse the pun, for the last 4 or 5 years. In 2016, we were at 39. In 2017, 41 in the world. And I'm afraid to say, Sally, in 2018, just 8 years after the tournament, we were sitting at 47 in the world with a brand value of $207 billion. The key takeaway there, 8 years since that magical day, in 2010, we've dropped 13 places in that index.
Oh, of course, it begs the question, what about other countries? Have they made more of it than we have? I mean, let's look at Russia, for example.
Yeah, we'll get to Russia in a second, but first Brazil, of course, which was 4 years after South Africa hosted the World Cup, Sally. And what's really interesting about this is that the World Cup kind of put the microscope on a Brazilian economy and a Brazilian political system which was really in trouble. So it almost backfired. So the year before the World Cup in Brazil, it was ranked 8th in the world in terms of its national brand. Incredibly, it was worth about $1.5 trillion. You would expect that to improve during the World Cup itself. But in fact, Sally, Brazil went backwards. So in 2014, it was ranked 10th in the world, and the value of its national brand actually went down. So that just highlights that it's one thing to have a big sporting spectacle in your country, but if you don't have the political principles in place, it can be disastrous. In fact, the brand value fell 5% in 2014. And if you look at Brazil's progress over the years that followed, Sally, it really hasn't made any progress at all. In fact, 2019, it had slipped to 17th in the world. And again, the politics come into play. We saw the president was impeached in Brazil in 2016. Another former president was sent to jail in 2017. So certainly the politics have not been supporting the brand, despite them hosting the World Cup.
And then what about Russia? I mean, maybe it's just a bad thing to have a World Cup. It does bad things to your brand.
Maybe it's a bad omen. Let's take a quick look at Russia. There's an example of how they got it right and an example of how they got it wrong as well. Let's focus firstly on how they got it right. The 2018 World Cup, largely regarded as a successful World Cup, and pretty much a stable political system supported the brand. So in 2017, the year before the tournament, their brand value was $832 billion. The following year, it had changed ever so slightly, around about 830. So a minor difference, and the brand experts say that wasn't a particularly big deal. So around about $2 billion from one year to the next. But this is important. Russia has actually made progress over the years since the World Cup. In fact, its brand ranking has now shot up to 14th in the world. So it's one example, Sally, of where the World Cup may have actually helped the country's brand. But let's focus finally on the Winter Olympics in 2014, Sally, and we'll bring that graphic up. And this is an example of where it went desperately wrong. So this was the most expensive Olympics in the Games history, Sally. It cost $51 billion. There was a lot of controversy around spending and corruption. In 2013, Russia's brand value was worth about $1.26 trillion. The following year, when they hosted the Olympics, the brand had actually lost $90 billion worth of value. And again, Russia was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. It invaded parts of eastern Ukraine. There were claims about homophobic policies ahead of those Olympic Games. And so, not surprising, I suppose, that its brand value fell 7% around the time that it hosted those Olympic Games. So, as the experts like to say, an Olympic Games or a World Cup, it's not a silver bullet that solves all of your problems.
Yeah, it's possibly a good showcase of what you are as a nation, but you have to underpin that with good fundamentals. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Michael Marillier there.